The Valorian Dominion had conquered 3,000 worlds across the galaxy. Their method was always the same. They would find a planet with life, send a message demanding surrender, and then take everything. The people became slaves. The resources became fuel. The planet became empty. This had worked for 400 years. No species had ever stopped them. Commander Torek stood on the bridge of his flagship. The Eternal Blade. He was tall and gray-skinned, with 4 eyes that could see in every direction at once. His uniform was covered in medals from 100 conquests. He had never lost a battle. He had never needed to. "Report?" he said. His sensors officer pulled up a hologram of a small blue planet. "Species number 3127, Commander. They call their world Earth, population of 8 billion. Technology level is nuclear age. They have basic space travel, but nothing beyond their own moon. No planetary shields. No unified government. They are divided into approximately 200 separate nations that frequently fight each other." Torek made a sound like a laugh. "Another easy harvest. Send the ultimatum." The message was transmitted in every human language. It was simple and clear. Surrender in 72 hours or face complete destruction. Resistance would mean extinction. The Valorians had sent this message 3,000 times before. The result was always the same. Some species surrendered immediately. Some tried to fight and were crushed within days. None survived? On Earth? The message arrived at 3:47 a.m. Korean Standard Time. Lieutenant Colonel Park. Do-Yun was working the night shift at the Korean Space Command Center when his screen filled with alerts. He was 38 years old, with tired eyes and a calm voice that never changed even in crisis. He had spent 15 years tracking satellites and space debris. He had never seen anything like this. "Sir," said one of his junior officers, "we're detecting a fleet of unknown vessels entering the solar system. Current count is 400 ships? No, 600? The number keeps increasing." Do-Yun watched the screen. The ships were massive. The smallest was larger than any structure humans had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a single organism with many parts. Then the message came. Within 1 hour, every government on Earth had received it. Within 2 hours, the United Nations Security Council was meeting. Within 6 hours, panic had spread across the planet. People ran through streets. Markets crashed. Planes were grounded. Some prayed. Some screamed. Some simply sat and waited for the end. The world's leaders argued about what to do. The Americans wanted to launch nuclear weapons at the fleet. The Russians agreed. The Chinese said it was pointless since the aliens clearly had better technology. The Europeans wanted to negotiate. Small nations demanded to be heard. Everyone shouted. No one listened. In Seoul, Do-Yun's team worked without sleep. They analyzed every part of the alien transmission, looking for anything useful. Most of his colleagues were focused on the words of the message. But Do-Yun noticed something else. "There's a second signal," he said quietly. His team gathered around his station. He showed them the data. Buried beneath the spoken message was another frequency. It was not words. It was something else. "What is it?" asked Captain Yoon, his second in command. "I don't know," Do-Yun admitted. "But it's scanning us. It's waiting for something." He needed help. He needed someone who understood alien communication, even though no human had ever actually communicated with aliens before. He made a call to the National Institute of Xenolinguistics. The woman who answered would change everything. Dr. Kim Yuna was 35 years old. She had spent her entire career studying how communication worked across different species on Earth, from whale songs to bee dances to the chemical signals of ants. She had always believed that if humanity ever met aliens, the key to survival would be understanding how they thought, not how to fight them. When Do-Yun explained what he had found, she drove through the chaos of Seoul's streets to reach the Space Command Center. The highways were jammed with people trying to flee the city, though there was nowhere safe to go. She arrived at 2 p.m., 12 hours after the ultimatum began. Do-yun showed her the hidden frequency. Yuna studied it for a long time. She ran it through her analysis programs. She compared it to communication patterns from hundreds of Earth species. Finally, she understood. It's a test, she said. A test for what? For fear. She pointed at the waveform on the screen. This frequency is designed to measure our psychological response. They're not just demanding surrender. They're studying how we react to the demand. They want to see if we panic, if we submit, if we attack. They're collecting data on us. Do-yun felt cold. Why would they need that? Because their entire strategy depends on predictable responses. Think about it. They've conquered 3,000 worlds. That means they've seen every type of reaction: surrender, aggression, despair. They know exactly how to handle each one. Their system is perfect because they always know what's coming. So what do we do? Yuna was quiet for a moment. Around them, screens showed images of the alien fleet. News channels broadcast riots and crying children and world leaders giving speeches full of empty hope. 60 hours remained until the deadline. We give them something they've never seen before, she said. She asked Do-yun to arrange a meeting with whoever was in charge of Earth's response. He made calls. He argued with generals and politicians. He used every contact he had. By evening, he had secured a video conference with the emergency coalition that was trying to coordinate humanity's answer to the ultimatum. General Lee Taiwu was leading the coalition's military side. He was 60 years old, a veteran of peacekeeping missions who had never expected to face an actual war, certainly not one against aliens. His face on the screen was exhausted and grim. "Dr. Kim," he said, "I have 12 hours before the coalition votes on our response. Half of them want to surrender. The other half want to launch everything we have at the fleet. Neither option ends well. If you have something else, I need to hear it now." Yuna took a breath. "General, the aliens expect us to do one of those two things. Their power comes from knowing what we'll do before we do it. But there's a third option. Something so different that they won't know how to respond." "And what is that?" "We invite them down to meet us. And we show them something that makes them question whether Earth is worth the cost." The general stared at her. "Dr. Kim, with respect, that sounds insane." "Yes," she agreed. "That's exactly why it might work." She had 24 hours to prove it. The emergency coalition met in a bunker beneath Geneva. Representatives from 40 nations sat around a long table, their faces lit by screens showing the alien fleet. They had been arguing for hours. Some were shouting. Some had given up and sat in silence. The deadline was now 48 hours away. General Lee Taiwu stood at the front of the room and called for order. It took several minutes before everyone quieted down. "We have a new proposal," he said. "Dr. Kim Yuna from the Korean Xenolinguistics team has developed an alternative response. I have reviewed it. I believe it deserves consideration." The French representative laughed bitterly. "What alternative?" "We have two choices: surrender and become slaves, or fight and die. There is no third option." "There might be," said General Lee. He nodded to the screen. And Yuna's face appeared. She was in a small office in Seoul, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. She had not slept in 30 hours. But her voice was steady. "Representatives of Earth," she began, "I have studied the alien transmission in detail. I have found something important. The Valorians do not simply conquer through force. They conquer through prediction. They have seen 3,000 species respond to their ultimatum. They know every reaction: surrender, negotiation, aggression, despair. They have prepared for all of them. That is why they always win." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the Japanese representative. "That we do nothing?" "No, I suggest we do something they have never seen. Something that does not fit any pattern they know." She explained her idea. The room listened. When she finished, there was a long silence. The American representative spoke first. "You want us to invite them to Earth? To show them museums?" Dr. Kim, these creatures have destroyed 3,000 civilizations. They will not be moved by statues. Perhaps not, Yuna admitted. But they will be confused. And confusion is something they have not experienced in 400 years. Right now, they know exactly what will happen. If we surrender, they will harvest us within a week. If we attack, they will destroy us within a day. But if we do something unexpected, something that makes no sense to them, they will have to stop and think. And that pause, that moment of uncertainty, might be enough. Enough for what? Demanded the Russian representative. To save us? No, enough to change the equation. Enough to make them wonder if Earth is different. And, if we're different, then maybe we're dangerous in a way they don't understand. The debate continued for hours. Yuna answered questions until her voice was hoarse. Many representatives remained skeptical. But as the hours passed, the mood in the room shifted. Not toward hope exactly, but toward something else. Curiosity, the same curiosity that Yuna was counting on. Finally, General Lee called for a vote. The result was narrow but clear. Earth would try something new. YUNA had 24 hours to prepare humanity's response. She did not do it alone. Within minutes of the vote, calls went out across the world. Linguists, historians, artists, programmers, engineers, anyone who could help. They worked in shifts across every time zone, passing information from team to team as the planet rotated. The core of the plan was simple. Yuna wanted to show the Valorians that humanity knew who they were and what they had done. Not through threats, but through memory. Humanity would demonstrate that they had been watching, learning, and remembering every species the Dominion had destroyed, but how could they know about the Dominion's victims? They had never contacted aliens before. This was where Yuna's insight became crucial. The transmission itself contains the information, she explained to her team in Seoul. When they sent the ultimatum, they included a data packet. It's standard for them. It tells the conquered species about the Dominion's power and history. It's meant to scare us. But it also contains records. Thousands of records. Ship logs, conquest reports, resource tallies. And buried in those records are names. Names of worlds. Names of species. Dates of destruction. Her team worked through the night, extracting information from the alien data packet. They found references to civilizations that had existed for millions of years before being wiped out. They found population counts and resource yields. They found everything except one thing, memory. The Valorians did not remember their victims. They only counted them. Yuna intended to fix that. She reached out to museums, universities, and art communities around the world. She asked them to create something impossible, memorials for species that no human had ever seen. Using the fragments of information in the Dominion's records, artists and historians worked to give shape to the lost civilizations. A statue based on a biological description. A plaque with a name and a date. A hologram showing what a city might have looked like before it was burned. It was not accurate. How could it be? But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the simple statement that these beings had existed, and that their destruction mattered. While the memorials were being created, Yuna worked on the message itself. It had to be perfect. The wrong tone would trigger a standard response from the Valorians. Too aggressive, and they would simply attack. Too submissive, and they would proceed with the conquest. The message had to be something else entirely. She wrote draft after draft. She consulted with psychologists and game theorists and poets. She tested each version against what she knew about Valorian behavior. Finally, with 6 hours left before the deadline, she had it. The message was transmitted on the same psychological frequency the Valorians had used. But instead of carrying fear, it carried certainty. Calm, absolute certainty. It read, "We have studied your conquests. We know what you are. We also know what you've never faced. You have harvested the fearful and destroyed the aggressive. But you have never met a species that remembers everything. Every atrocity. Every world you've burned. Every child you've enslaved. We remember for them. And we're still here? We invite your commanders to the surface. Come and see what we've built on a world you think is primitive. Then decide if Earth is worth the cost." The message reached the Eternal Blade 7 minutes after transmission. Commander Torek was in his quarters when his communications officer delivered it. He read it 3 times. Then he read it again. In 400 years of service to the Dominion, he had received thousands of responses to the ultimatum, begging, threats, bargains, pleas for mercy, declarations of defiance. He had a response prepared for each one. He had no response for this. He called his senior officers to the bridge. He showed them the message. They argued about what it meant. Some said it was a trick, an attempt to lure them into a trap. Some said the humans had simply gone insane from fear. Some said the message should be ignored and the bombardment should begin immediately, but Torek was curious. That was his weakness. That was why he had risen so high in the Dominion and also why he had made enemies. He asked questions that others did not ask. He wanted to understand, not just to conquer. "Prepare a shuttle," he said. "I will go to the surface myself." His officers protested. It was against protocol. It was dangerous. It was unprecedented. "Yes," Torek agreed. "It is all of those things? That is exactly why I must go." On Earth, Una received word that a Valorian shuttle was descending toward Sol. The first part of her plan had worked. The aliens were confused enough to come and look. Now came the hard part. She had to show them something that would make them hesitate. And she had to do it before they decided that the simplest solution was to kill everyone and never think about Earth again. She looked out the window at the city. People were still in the streets. Some were crying. Some were holding signs. Some were simply sitting together, holding hands. "We remember," she whispered to herself. "That has to be enough?" The shuttle broke through the clouds and began its descent. The Valorian shuttle landed in an empty field outside Sol. It was a gray metal craft, shaped like a teardrop, twice the size of a commercial airplane. Steam rose from its hull as it cooled in the morning air. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then a ramp extended from the side, and Commander Torek walked out. He was accompanied by 4 guards and 2 advisors. They wore armor that looked like black glass and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Torek himself wore no armor. He wanted the humans to see his confidence. Waiting for them was a small group. General Lee Taiwu stood in front, wearing his dress uniform. Dr. Kim Yuna was beside him, dressed simply in a gray coat. Behind them was a young officer named Choi Min-jae, who served as their security escort. He was only 26 years old and had never expected his military career to involve meeting aliens. Torek studied the humans. They were smaller than he had expected, soft-looking, 2 eyes instead of 4, which meant limited vision. They did not appear threatening in any way. "I am Commander Torek of the Valorian Dominion," he said. His voice was translated through a device on his collar. "You invited us to see something." "Show me." Yuna stepped forward. She was not smiling. Her face was calm and serious. "Commander, thank you for coming. Please follow us. We have arranged transportation." She gestured toward a line of black vehicles waiting on a nearby road. Torek's guards tensed, but he waved them down. He was curious. That curiosity had brought him to the surface, and it would carry him further. They drove into Sol. Torek watched the city through the vehicle's window. He had studied the intelligence reports. 8 billion humans divided into hostile nations, constantly fighting each other. He expected to see chaos and fear. He expected buildings on fire and people running. Instead, he saw something else. The streets were full of people, but they were not running. They were walking, shopping, eating at outdoor restaurants. Children played in a park beneath a sky where Valorian warships were clearly visible. An old woman sat on a bench feeding pigeons. A group of young people laughed together outside a coffee shop. "Your people do not flee," Torek observed. "No," said Yuna. "They do not hide." "No. Why?" Yuna turned to look at him. "Because they have decided that how they spend their final hours matters more than how many hours they have left. If these are our last days, we will not spend them in fear." We will spend them being ourselves. Torek did not understand this. In his experience, species facing extinction did one of two things. They panicked or they surrendered to despair. He had never seen a population simply continue living as if nothing was wrong. "You are strange creatures," he said. "Yes," Yuna agreed. "We are." The convoy arrived at a large building in the center of the city. It was a museum, one of many in Seoul, though this one had been transformed in the past 48 hours. Workers had labored without sleep to fill it with new exhibits. Artists had created pieces in hours that would normally take months. Historians had written descriptions for species they had never seen. The entire world had contributed. Yuna led Torek and his delegation inside. The first room was empty except for a single hologram in the center. It showed a planet covered in purple forests, with 3 moons in the sky. Text beneath it read, Vorlon 3, conquered by the Valorian Dominion 3,000 years ago. Population, 2.3 billion. No survivors. Torek stopped. He stared at the hologram. "How do you know about Vorlon 3? He demanded. "You told us," said Yuna. "The information was in the data packet you transmitted with your ultimatum. We simply read it." She led him to the next room. And the next. And the next. Each room contained memorials to a different species the Dominion had destroyed. Some were holographic recreations of cities. Some were statues based on biological descriptions in the Valorian records. Some were simply plaques with names and dates. The museum contained over 300 exhibits, and more were being added every hour as teams around. The world completed their work. Torek walked through the rooms in silence. His guards followed, their weapons lowered. His advisors whispered to each other, but he did not listen. In one room, he stopped before a statue of a being with 4 arms and a long tail. The plaque read, "The Solari, conquered 200 years ago. Known for their music, which was said to be the most beautiful in the galaxy. No recordings survive?" Torek stared at the statue for a long time. "My grandfather led the conquest of the Solari homeworld," he said quietly. "I have seen his reports." He listed their population, their resources, their military capacity. He did not mention their music. "No," said Yuna. "He wouldn't have. You created this statue?" "An artist in Brazil made it. She worked for 18 hours straight, using only the physical description from your records. She said she wanted to give them a face, even if she could never know if it was accurate." Torek turned to Yuna. For the first time, his voice was not commanding. "It was uncertain. Why?" he asked. "Why do this? You cannot save these species. They are gone. They have been gone for centuries. What purpose does this serve?" Yuna had prepared for this question. She had thought about it for 48 hours, ever since she first understood what humanity could offer. "Commander," she said, "your Dominion has conquered 3,000 worlds. You have taken their resources, their people, their futures, but you have never taken the time to remember them. They exist in your records only as numbers. Population counts, resource yields. They are data, not beings." She gestured to the exhibits around them. "Humans are different. We remember. It is what we do. We build monuments to our dead. We tell stories about people who lived thousands of years ago. We carry the past with us even when it is painful, especially when it is painful." She stepped closer to him. "You asked what purpose this serves. The answer is simple. If you destroy Earth, you destroy the only record of what you have done. We have become the memory of your victims. Their names, their worlds, their existence. It all lives here now, in us. Kill us, and you kill the only monument they will ever have." Torek was silent. One of his advisors stepped forward. "Commander, this is manipulation. They are trying to confuse us. We should return to the ship and begin the bombardment." Torek raised a hand. The advisor went quiet. "You are manipulating us," Torek said to Yuna. "That is obvious." "Yes," she admitted. "You believe that this memory will make me hesitate. I believe it already has." Torak looked around the room. His 4 eyes moved slowly across the statues and holograms and plaques. 3,000 species, reduced to numbers in Dominion databases. And here, on a planet that was supposed to be primitive and weak, they had been given form again. He thought about his grandfather's reports on the Solari. Efficient, clinical, complete. No mention of music. No mention of art, no mention of anything that made them more than resources to be harvested. He thought about the 400 years of conquest that had built the Dominion. The efficiency of it. The completeness of it. He thought about the fact that in 400 years, no one had ever built a memorial for the conquered. "We will return to our ship," he said. "I must consider what I have seen." Yuna nodded. She had done everything she could. Now she could only wait. As Torak walked toward the exit, he stopped one more time. He was looking at a small exhibit in the corner. It was not a hologram or a statue. It was a simple drawing made with colored pencils on paper. It showed a creature with 6 legs and large eyes standing beneath a yellow sun. A child had made it. Beneath the drawing was a note. "For the friends we never got to meet. From the children of Earth." Torak stared at it for a long time. Then he left the museum and returned to the sky. "Commander." Torak returned to the Eternal Blade in silence. His guards and advisors followed him through the corridors of the ship without speaking. They had never seen him like this. In 400 years of service, Torak had always been decisive. He gave orders and they were followed. He saw problems and he solved them. He did not hesitate. Now he hesitated. He went to his quarters and sat alone for 3 hours. He reviewed the data from his visit to Earth. He watched recordings of the museum, of the streets of Seoul, of the humans who refused to run even though death was coming for them. He thought about the child's drawing of a creature with 6 legs and large eyes. Finally, he called his senior officers to the bridge. "Report on fleet status," he said. Admiral Vex. His second-in-command stepped forward. "All ships are in position, Commander. Bombardment batteries are charged and ready. We can begin the cleansing operation on your order." Torak nodded slowly. "And the crew? What is their status?" Vex hesitated. This was an unusual question. "The crew is prepared, Commander." "That is not what I asked. What is their status?" Vex looked uncomfortable. "There has been some discussion among the lower ranks. The human transmission was received on open channels. Many crew members heard the message and saw the images from the museum. And how have they responded?" "There is unrest, Commander, particularly among the conscripts." The conscripts. Torak knew what that meant. Half of the Dominion's military was made up of soldiers taken from conquered worlds. They served because they had no choice. Their families were held as guarantees of their loyalty. They fought for the Dominion because if they did not, everyone they loved would die. And now they had seen the museum. They had seen memorials to their own ancestors, to species that had been erased so completely that even their names had been forgotten. Until now. "Show me," said Torak. Vex brought up internal security footage from around the fleet. Torak watched. In the barracks of a dozen ships, soldiers were gathered in small groups, talking in low voices. Some were looking at images from the museum on their personal devices. A few were crying. In one recording, a soldier from a conquered world called Nefara stood before a memorial to his own people and read the words aloud. His voice shook. "The Nethran civilization," he read. "Conquered by the Valorian Dominion 150 years ago. Known for their poetry and their tradition of oral history. Population before conquest, 800 million. Current population, unknown." The soldier looked at the screen for a long time. Then he turned to the others in his barracks. "They remembered us," he said. "These humans. They remembered us when our own masters forgot we ever existed." Torak turned off the footage. "Commander," said Admiral Vex, "I recommend we begin the bombardment immediately. The longer we wait, the more the unrest will spread." "We must restore order by destroying the planet?" "Yes, once the humans are gone, the memorials will be gone. The conscripts will have nothing to hold on to." Torak considered this. It was logical. It was efficient. It was exactly what the Dominion had always done, but he could not stop thinking about the statue of the Solari musician. His grandfather had conquered that world. He had never mentioned their music. No, said Torak. We will wait. The bridge went silent. Admiral Vex stared at him. Commander, that is against protocol. The ultimatum expires in 6 hours. If we do not act, we will wait, Torak repeated. That is my order. Vex's jaw tightened. Yes, Commander. On Earth, Yuna and her team waited. They had no way of knowing what was happening in the alien fleet. All they could do was watch the sky and hope. General Lee Taiwa had put all of Earth's defenses on high alert, but everyone knew it was symbolic. Humanity's weapons could not even scratch the Valorian ships. If the bombardment began, it would be over in hours. Yuna sat in the command center, drinking cold coffee and watching the countdown. 6 hours. 5, 4. Lieutenant Colonel Park Do-yun sat beside her. He had been awake for nearly 3 days. His eyes were red and his hands trembled slightly. Do you think it worked? He asked. I don't know, Yuna admitted. All I know is that they haven't attacked yet. Every hour they wait is an hour they never waited before. 3 hours. 2 hours. 1 hour. The deadline passed. Nothing happened. Around the world, people watched the sky and waited for the fire to come. It did not come. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The Valorian fleet remained in orbit, silent and still. In the command center, Do-yun looked at Yuna. What does this mean? I don't know, she said again. But her heart was beating faster. On the Eternal Blade, chaos was beginning. Admiral Vex had decided to act. He believed Torak had lost his nerve, that the humans had somehow poisoned his mind. He gathered a group of loyal officers and confronted the commander on the bridge. You have failed the Dominion, Vex said. The deadline has passed and you have given no order. This is dereliction of duty. By the authority of Valorian military law, I am relieving you of command. Torak looked at him calmly. And then what, Admiral? You will destroy the planet? Yes, as we should have done hours ago. And what of the fleet? Half our soldiers are conscripts from conquered worlds. They have seen the museum. They have seen that someone remembers their people. Will they follow your orders? Vex hesitated. He had not considered this. He should have. Throughout the fleet, the unrest had grown. What began as whispered conversations had become open defiance. Conscripts refused to report to their battle stations. Some locked themselves in their barracks. Others gathered in groups and demanded to speak with their commanders on the ship Crimson Thunder. A conscript named Pael stood before his commanding officer and spoke for all of them. We will not fire on Earth, he said. They remembered us. They built monuments to our dead. No one has ever done that. The Dominion erased our histories and told us we never mattered. These humans say we did matter. We will not help you destroy them. The commander drew his weapon. You will follow orders or you will die. Pael did not move. Then we will die. But we will die knowing that someone remembered us. That is more than the Dominion ever gave us. The commander looked at the soldiers behind Pael. There were dozens of them. Their faces were calm. They were not afraid. He lowered his weapon. I am returning to the Dominion homeworld, he said. I will deliver your message to the High Council myself. I will show them what you have built. I will tell them what happened here. Will they listen? Probably not. They will probably execute me for failure and send another fleet to finish what I did not. Then why do it? Torak thought about the Solari musician. The child's drawing. The soldier named Pael, who was willing to die so that his people would be remembered. Because some things matter more than survival, he said. You taught me that. He ended the transmission and gave his final order. All ships withdraw from Earth orbit. Set course for the homeworld. The Valorian fleet began to move. One by one, the massive warships turned away from the blue planet and headed for deep space on Earth. People watched the sky and saw the lights moving away. They did not know what it meant. They did not know if the aliens would return. But for the first time in 3 days, they felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. In Seoul. Yuna stood outside the museum and watched the ships disappear. Do-yeon stood beside her. "Do you think he'll succeed?" he asked. "Do you think the High Council will listen?" Yuna shook her head. "No, I think they'll kill him." "But it doesn't matter. Why not?" "Because the message is already out there. Every soldier in that fleet saw what we built. Every conscript knows that someone remembered their people. That knowledge will spread. It will grow. And eventually it will change things." She looked at the sky, empty now except for stars. "We didn't win today," she said. "We just didn't lose. But sometimes that's enough to change everything." 1 year passed. Earth was no longer a quiet planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The museum in Seoul had grown into a vast complex covering several city blocks. Artists and historians from around the world worked there every day, adding new memorials, improving old ones, and cataloging information about species the Dominion had destroyed. It was called the Hall of Memory, and people came from everywhere to see it, but they were not only humans who came. 3 months after the Valorian fleet withdrew, a small ship appeared in Earth's orbit. It was not Valorian. It was old and damaged, held together with patches and desperate repairs. A message came from the ship in broken English. "We are refugees from the world called Tanara. We heard your broadcast. We heard that someone remembers. Please, we have nowhere else to go." Dr. Kim Yuna was now Earth's official ambassador to off-world species, a title that had not existed a year ago. She personally welcomed the Tanaran refugees when they landed. There were only 42 of them, the last survivors of a civilization that had once numbered in the billions. More ships came after that. Some carried refugees. Some carried scholars who wanted to contribute to the Hall of Memory. Some carried warriors who had deserted from the Dominion military after seeing Yuna's broadcast. They all had the same story. They had heard that somewhere in the galaxy someone was remembering the lost. Earth became a gathering place. A symbol, a beginning. The Galactic Compact was formed 6 months after the Valorian withdrawal. It was a fragile alliance of free worlds and refugee populations, held together by hope and shared purpose. Earth was not its leader. Humanity was too young, too inexperienced in galactic affairs, but Earth was the Compact's heart. The Keepers of Memory. Yuna worked every day on building the alliance. She traveled to meetings on distant moons and space stations. She negotiated with species who had never trusted anyone before. She listened to stories of loss and survival that broke her heart. And she made sure every story was recorded and added to the Hall of Memory. She did not do this work alone. Bae Seojin had been a soldier in the Korean army when the Valorians came. She had expected to die fighting aliens. Instead, she found herself coordinating the growing refugee populations arriving on Earth. She was practical and organized and had no patience for politics, which made her perfect for the job. Thousands of beings from dozens of species passed through her care, and she treated each one with the same firm kindness. "You're safe now," she would tell them. "Earth remembers. You will not be forgotten here." Lieutenant Colonel Park Do-yeon continued his work at the Space Command, which had been transformed into Earth's primary contact point with the rest of the galaxy. He was promoted twice but never left his post. He said he liked being the first to know when a new ship arrived. He said it reminded him that the universe was bigger than he had ever imagined. Han Ji-woo, the communications officer who had broadcast the museum's contents to the Valorian fleet, became the head of Earth's interstellar communication network. She built a system that could reach every corner of the galaxy, and she used it to spread one message over and over: "You are not forgotten." Someone remembers, and Choi Min-jae, the young officer who had escorted Torak through Seoul, found his own purpose. He trained the first generation of human diplomats who would represent Earth to the galaxy. He taught them what he had learned in those strange hours with the alien commander, that strength was not always about weapons, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was listen. The Dominion did not collapse. The High Council executed Commander Torak for his failure at Earth, just as he had predicted. But before he died, he transmitted the museum's records to every corner of Dominion space. The rebellion he had sparked did not end with his death. It spread. Worlds that had been silent for centuries began to resist. Conscripts deserted in growing numbers. Some fled to Earth, others stayed in Dominion space and fought from within. The great machine of conquest that had run smoothly for 400 years began to break down. The war was not over. It might never be over. But for the first time, the Dominion was losing, and at the center of it all was a simple truth that humanity had proven. The greatest weapon against tyranny was not a fleet or a bomb. It was memory. It was the refusal to let the lost be forgotten. On the one-year anniversary of the Valorian withdrawal, a ceremony was held at the Hall of Memory. Representatives from every species in the Galactic Compact attended. Una gave a speech, though she had never liked public speaking. She kept it short. 1 year ago, she said, we faced a choice. We could surrender and be forgotten, or we could fight and be destroyed. We chose neither. We chose to remember. We chose to say that every life matters, that every civilization matters, that the universe is less without each one that is lost. She paused and looked out at the crowd. Humans stood beside beings with scales and feathers and tentacles. Former enemies stood beside former slaves. All of them were looking at her. We did not know if it would work, she continued. We did not know if memory could be a weapon. But it was the only weapon we had, and it turned out to be enough. After the ceremony, Una walked through the Hall of Memory alone. It was late, and most of the visitors had gone. She passed through room after room, looking at the memorials she had helped create. So many names. So many worlds. So much loss. She stopped in front of the child's drawing that had affected Commander Torak so deeply. It was still there, protected behind glass now, with a small plaque explaining its origin. For the friends we never got to meet? From the children of Earth. A young girl was standing beside her. She was perhaps 8 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. Una recognized her. She was the daughter of one of the Teneran refugees. Why do we build these? The girl asked. Why do we make statues and pictures for people we never knew? Una knelt beside her, just as she had imagined doing someday. It was a question she had thought about for a year. She had many answers. Political answers. Strategic answers. Philosophical answers, but for this child she gave the simplest one. Because if no one remembers them, it's like they never existed. And if they never existed, then what happened to them can happen again. We remember so that it won't. The girl thought about this. Then she nodded slowly, as if it made sense to her. I want to remember too, she said. Una smiled. Then you will. That's all it takes. Just deciding that it matters. They walked together through the hall, the human and the alien child, looking at the memorials of 1,000 lost worlds. Outside, the sky was full of ships. Not warships, but transports, carrying survivors and scholars and builders from across the galaxy. All of them coming to Earth. All of them coming to remember. Earth had been next on the list. Now it was the beginning of something else, entirely. In the years that followed, the Galactic Compact grew. The Dominion weakened. More worlds broke free. More species joined the Alliance. And through it all, Earth remained what it had become in those desperate hours when destruction seemed certain, the place where memory lived. The Hall of Memory expanded again and again. New wings were added for new species. Children from 100 worlds grew up visiting it, learning the names of civilizations they had never known. The lost were not forgotten. Their stories were told. Their existence mattered. And humanity, the young species that had never traveled beyond its own moon, became something it had never expected to be. The keepers of memory. The voice of the forgotten, the proof that sometimes the smallest gesture, the simplest act of remembrance, could shake the foundations of an empire. Earth was supposed to be just another number on a list. Instead, it became the place where the galaxy learned to remember, and that made all the difference.